You've probably heard stories about humans being abducted by aliens in UFOs. These absurd tales probably left you really confused. Well, I hate to break it to you, it's not about to get any better. Here's a real story of a man that disappeared after sighting a UFO. Curious as to what actually happened? Well, let's get straight into the video. The man who disappeared after sighting a UFO. Frederick Valentich. I know the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear UFO is aliens. That's not entirely true, so let's get the facts straight. A UFO is a non-identified flying object. This basically means any object moving in the air that cannot be identified. Could be a bird, could be a plane, could be a football about to slam you in the face. Now that we have that out of the way, who was Frederick Valentich? Frederick was a young Australian pilot, born 9th of June 1958, making him 20 years of age on 21st of October 1978, when tragedy struck. Fred held 150 total hours of flight time and a Class 4 instrument rating. Ask me what that is and I'll be dead silent. Fred had applied twice to the Royal Australian Air Force but failed. He had a private pilot license and he kept studying part-time to become a commercial pilot. Fred was also known to have a poor achievement record, having failed his commercial license examination multiple times. This doesn't mean Fred was a bad pilot. It just shows that he struggled in his field, and it also proves that he was an inexperienced pilot. Frederick was expected to face prosecution for violating some Air Force rules. He had deliberately flown into a cloud 2 times. Fred had also received a warning once for straying into a controlled zone in Sydney. I don't know what that looks like to you, but it's given rebel. What happened that night? On the evening of Saturday, 21st of October 1978, Frederick Valentich had intentions of flying to King Island. He rented a blue and white Cessna 182L model from Southern Air Service at Moorabbin Airfield, SSW of Melbourne City. He took off at 6:19 p.m. from Moorabbin Airport in Victoria. It was meant to be about 45 minutes of flight while flying at a 4,500 feet altitude, and the sun was set at 6:48 p.m. It was going to fly over a body of water called the Bass Strait, though not always recommended. Around 7:06 p.m., Fred radioed Melbourne Air Traffic Control when he was at Cape Otway. He spoke to Steve Ruby, who was handling the air sector at that particular time. Fred had fear in his voice and said there was a large aircraft below 5,000 feet above him. He was frantic and said it had 4 bright lights like landing lights, and it was playing some sort of game and flying above him 2 to 3 times at a speed that he could not identify. Steve asked if he could describe the aircraft, and he said it was long and metallic. Fred also added that it was orbiting over him while shining a green light on him. "It just vanished," he told the ATC with a panicked tone, and suddenly added that he could see it again. After that, Frederick's aircraft engine started to act up and it began to produce a rattling sound. The transmission ended when he said, "It's not an aircraft." After this, there was a weird sound for 17 seconds before everything cut off. Unfortunately, the recording of the conversation Fred had with the ATC has been wiped off the internet, but we were able to find the audio of the sound at the end. Many people have stated that it sounds like metal scraping up on metal, although it could have been a sound of Fred's plane crashing into water. A search team was sent out a few hours after, but there was no trace of Fred and the Cessna in the surrounding body of water or land. This was the last time Fred's voice was heard. Those that have heard the real recording believe it to have been extremely scary and worrying. Some people have stated that Fred actually gave a more detailed description of the UFO in the original transmission. The witnesses. There were UFO sightings around Cape Otway weeks before and after Valentich disappeared. But we will be focusing on the sightings of the night Fred went missing. After Valentich's case came out to the public, some people came forward as witnesses to sighting UFOs or even the green lights that he described. Their claims seemed to match up with that of Fred, and the timing was also accurate. But because they all came out after the publication, it couldn't be 100% regarded as evidence. Mr. Ken Anson and his two nieces had seen Valentich's plane and the green object light following it on their way driving home. On getting home, Mr. Anson told his wife what they saw, but she laughed at the story. He also told his co-workers the next day, but they only believed the story of the airplane and not that of the large green object light following the plane. He decided not to talk about this any further so as to avoid ridicule. Years later, they were interviewed and the stories of Mr. Anson along with his nieces remained the same. Another witness, Roy Manifold, set a time-lapse camera on his tripod around the site so as to get a photograph of the sun setting over water. When he checked the developed photos, he noticed it had captured an object rising speedily above the water. It was around the same period Valentich radioed the ATC. It is quite obvious that something weird is happening in the picture, but I can't place what it could be exactly. Maybe you should try. What do you think? The next morning after Fred went missing, a farmer near Adeline reportedly witnessed a weird aircraft flying over his property with the Cessna stuck to its side and leaking oil. The farmer was said to have scratched the plane's registration number down on his tractor, but he never came forward because he was ridiculed by the few friends he told. The story resurfaced 36 years after Fred went missing. The identity of the farmer remains unknown. The Melbourne Police Department also received a report of a mysterious light aircraft landing around Cape Otway that evening. Many guessed it was Valentich making an emergency landing, but the police did not further investigation on it. Some investigators were also able to get witnesses that claimed to have seen a green light in the sky that night. 5 years after Valentich had gone missing, an Indian cow flap similar to that of Frederick washed ashore on Flinders Island. The possibilities of it being from Valentich's missing aircraft was investigated. It couldn't be confirmed as is because all the aircraft with similar details had crashed before and after Valentich's incidents. These witnesses started to make me feel like Valentich was actually abducted by the UFO. But we have more evidence pointing out that Fred might have had other intentions that night. Here are the oddities in Valentich's story. Frederick was actually a firm believer in UFOs and aliens. His family members and even his girlfriend confirmed this. It was also mentioned that his beliefs might have been strengthened after he came across some governmental confidential files on UFOs. I wonder what it feels like knowing, something the world doesn't. Fred's dad, Guido Valentich, who died in the year 2000, also believed his son might have been abducted by aliens. Sources mentioned that 6 days before Frederick went missing, he had told his girlfriend, Miss Rhonda Rushton, that if a UFO landed in front of me right now, I would go in it, but never without you. This seems quite romantic if you ask me. It also sounds like Fred was either trying to create a foundation for his disappearance, or he was really just good at predicting his own downfall. It was also stated that Fred had promised his girlfriend that he would pick her up for dinner around 7:30 p.m. This wasn't possible because of the time it would take him to fly to and from King Island, though Rhonda was said to have denied this, saying she was actually meant to follow him to King Island, but was delayed because she couldn't get a lift to the airport in time. With these many facts, I stand in confusion. Another major anomaly was that Valentich never informed the King Island flight service that he was going to be flying in that night, so they could turn the runway lights on at the airport. Fred also knew he had to inform them as it wasn't his first time flying to King Island. Frederick told his family members that he was going to pick up friends at King Island, but he told the briefing officer he was going to pick up crayfish. Both stories were later confirmed to have been lies, as there was no crayfish on the island that day, and neither were there any friends for him to pick up. It seems to me that young Frederick had some tricks up his sleeves. Fred was also seen packing 4 extra life jackets onto his aircraft. I don't think he would need to do that to convince the air service, since he didn't even tell them he was going to pick up friends. I believe Valentich would have only done that if he actually intended to pick up friends. I mean, I don't think crayfish needs life jacket, correct me if I'm wrong. Something I find extremely weird was that Fred pumped enough fuel for an 800-kilometer trip, while it takes about half of that to and from King Island. I'm not Frederick, but I don't think I'll pump extra fuel in an aircraft that was meant to return, unless I had the intentions of keeping it. Steve Ruby, the air traffic advisor that spoke to Fred, believes firmly that Valentich was genuinely terrified. We also do not have any information that states Frederick was a trained voice actor, so it would have been harder for him to fake his encounter. Alright Sherlock Holmes, I'd expect you to be piecing the missing puzzles together. While you're at it, please don't forget to smash the dislike button twice and the like button 3 times. Click the notification button and hit the notification bell. An investigator never misses on the details. Now, the theories. Theory number 1. Flying upside down theory. It is believed that Frederick was flying upside down, and what he actually saw was a reflection of his plane on the water. This is impossible for the type of plane Valentich was flying, as the fuel would not have reached the engine. The Cessna cannot fly upside down for up to 1 minute without crashing, talk less of the 6 minutes of transmission. Theory number 2. Fake abduction and resurface theory. What if Fred was never around Cape Otway and he faked it? We already know he had an obsession for UFOs. Since his career was not working out, Valentich could have faked it all to drive attention to his name. Fred had loaded more fuel than he needed for the journey. This could mean he didn't want to go to King Island and didn't want to crash either. Maybe he just wanted to fly somewhere else, fake his abduction, then come back with stories. Valentich would have gained a lot of fame, attention and money from this. But maybe it all went wrong and he crashed in the process, but at a location far from Cape Otway, hence why his plane was never found. Frederick could have also faked his abduction and started a new life somewhere else. YouTuber Merc Dogs made a video on Fred's disappearance. He pointed out that a movie about UFOs titled Close Encounters of the Third Kind aired in 1977, just a year before Fred went missing. He said a scene in the movie seemed exactly like what happened to Fred. Did the movie inspire Valentich to stage his abduction? Check out the YouTuber's page, Merc Dogs, to see the clip and what he thinks. Theory number 3. The seaside theory. Considering the fact that Frederick was struggling to achieve his dreams, he could have become really depressed. What if he actually wanted to commit suicide, but go out with a bang? Though, Fred's family members and doctors have repeatedly confirmed that he was happy and emotionally stable. It is a known fact that most depressed people might not actually look depressed. A vast majority are actually known to put up a show when they're around their family and friends. Theory number 4. The panic crash theory. Out of all the previous theories, this has research and scientific backings. It is believed that Fred could have been onto the illusion of a tilted horizon. He could have freaked out, then gone into a graveyard spiral. Since it was dark and over a large body of water, Fred could have been disoriented, being inexperienced, and was probably flying in circles. Packed with being tense, there is a possibility that he had started to hallucinate. Since he believed in UFOs, this could have made it easier for his brain to play tricks on him. This action could have made him crash into the water. We must also take into account that it's much harder to find a wreckage in the sea than to find it on land. Theory number 5. The UFO abduction theory. Let us take a step into the unimaginable. What if all Fred said was true? What if he had just forgotten to contact King Island? What if he didn't know there was no crayfish on the island? I mean, he did load the plane with more life jackets than he needed. Let's assume he really intended to pick up friends, but it got picked up by his alien friends. Some people have also said the UFO used a magnetic force to disrupt Valentich's plane and open a portal to its own dimension through which it took Fred. In conclusion, I believe the disappearance of Frederick Valentich is a very broad case, with many theories and many facts standing ready to debunk every one of them. It has become impossible to fathom what could have happened to Frederick. We're just left with pieces of puzzles that have been passed down to be solved. What do you think happened to Fred? Drop your comments down below. Do you have a new theory or fact to support an already existing one? Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Also click the notification bell to get notified when I post. Expect fun, interesting, educational stories and facts you probably haven't heard before. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.